Hello and welcome to this Oak Tree English video on punctuation. Punctuation is how we know how to read English. It tells us where to pause, where to emphasize, and when to stop. It can also change the meaning of sentences, as we shall see. Today we're going to talk about commas, end sentence marks, and apostrophes. So to start off, let's talk about commas. Commas tell you where you need to breathe. That's the rule of thumb. That's the basic idea. Commas tell you when you need to breathe. They're pronounced like this. Not to be confused with the pronunciation of the full stop, which is. We also use them at times when you might use them, and therefore times when you might need to breathe would be after a time phrase or a discourse marker, like last week, comma. We'll look at examples in a moment. We use them to separate dependent and independent clauses, particularly if the dependent clause comes first. So think about a conditional where you have an if clause or an unless clause and then a resulting clause. It's the if clause that comes. If the if clause comes first, you separate it with a comma. If the result clause, the independent clause, comes first, you don't. Lists can include a list of adjectives, as we shall see in the first sentence that'll come up in a moment. So we use them in lists to separate the individual parts. We use them in parenthetical use. That is, like we're putting information in brackets. So you use them to add extra information, for example, non-defining relative clauses. We use them in direct address. So before, I'll show you how in a moment. We use them in dates and addresses, and we use them in numbers. So let's have a look at that. Let's think about that rule of thumb. It's about when you take a breath. So for example, Oak Tree English is a fantastic, comma, awesome and useful channel. A fantastic, awesome and useful channel. If you want to add an extra comma before the and, it's actually got a name. That's called the Oxford comma. Ooh, I see some of you are feeling very excited about that, particularly those of you who have been to Oxford and think, oh, Oxford's awesome, I'll use the Oxford comma. It's absolutely fine if you do, it's fine if you don't. Doesn't matter to me either way, but be consistent. If you're going to use the Oxford comma, use it all the way through. We also use them for sentence starters like time phrases. Have a look at this one. In the morning, comma, I wake up and watch Oak Tree English. In the morning, I wake up and watch Oak Tree English. So you see, we're separating that first phrase, the first time phrase, or it could be a discourse marker like, in addition, in my opinion, from my point of view. These are all discourse markers. Separate independent clauses. Watch this. If you want to pass your exam, that's the dependent clause. It doesn't work as a sentence on its own. You have to add it to a an independent clause, like watch Oak Tree English. That you may be beginning to see a theme arising here. If you want to pass your exam, watch Oak Tree English. However, if you put it the other way around, watch Oak Tree English if you want to pass your exam, no comma. No breath. In lists, watch this. Oak Tree English helps people learn functional skills, comma, GCSE and general English. It also works like, for example, with Oak Tree English is a fantastic, comma, awesome and useful channel. This is also a list of adjectives. Now, I mentioned a parenthetical use. like it being in brackets. Watch this. Oak Tree English, comma, which is the best channel on YouTube, comma, helped me pass my exam. Firstly, I'm very glad that you passed your exam with the help of Oak Tree English. And for those of you who haven't passed your exam yet, I hope Oak Tree English helps you to do so. However, this would work if you didn't have that middle section. So Oak Tree English helped me pass my exam is a sentence that makes sense and it works on its own. Oak Tree English, which is the best channel on YouTube, that's opinion, by the way. I can't actually verify that, and if the larger channels would like to compete with me, that's absolutely fine. Which is the best channel on YouTube is extra information. So we're putting it in commas like it is, like as if it is brackets. Direct address. Mum said, comma, watch more Oak Tree English videos. My mum doesn't sound like that, by the way. My mum's doesn't speak like that. Actually, I don't think I know anyone who speaks like that. The person who's speaking is separated. The introduction of the speaker before the inverted commas with a comma. So mum said, comma, and then you have the inverted commas, the speech marks, which tell you that this is a direct quote from that these are the exact words that mum uttered. We don't use, as some countries do, some languages use dashes or hyphens to denote direct reported speech. We use inverted commas at the beginning and at the end. That's the English convention of how to do it. And if you're not from the UK or not a native English speaker and you're finding this difficult, just remember that you use inverted commas. That's the speech marks to show reported speech, direct reported speech. Now, dates and addresses, how does that work? Well, meet me at 7 Oak Tree Avenue, comma, Englishville, on Friday, comma, the 4th of March, full stop. So we've got 7 Oak Tree Avenue, and then that is separated from the town. So the name of the street is separated from the town, which is separated from the county, which is separated from the country, all separated with commas. Same thing with dates. The day is separated from the date and the month. Now, what about numbers? This is different in different cultures, but here's how we do it. Oak Tree English's most popular video has 7,372 views so far. That was accurate at the time of writing. I believe it's gone up to 7,400 and something now, which is rather exciting, I have to say. Thank you to all those people who've watched it. So what we do is we separate with commas, not points. So in a lot of countries, particularly European countries, they put they count from the right and they go 1, 2, 3, point, 1, 2, 3, point. The point in the British convention or the English convention denotes denotes decimal places, and you're separating the whole integer. There you go. That's a nice word for you. The whole number from the fractional numbers with a point. So don't do that. We have commas where many European countries, I know France does this, I know that Germany does this, I don't know about every country, but I imagine there's lots of other places, I believe Poland does as well, put a point, we put a comma, they put a comma where we put a point. So you count from the right hand side, 1, 2, 3, comma, 1, 2, 3, comma. So if you have 1 million, it's 1, comma, 0, 0, 0, comma, 0, 0, 0. Okay. That is our convention on commas in numbers. You're really bored of talking about commas, aren't you? Okay, let's see what else we've got. End sentence marks. Now these are things that, stop me if I'm getting complicated, that end sentences. And there are only 3. So you have the full stop. In most cases, the full stop will end the sentence. There's a few differences which we'll talk about in a second, but the full stop in most cases. A question mark ends a direct question. For example, what is your name? Question mark. Where are you from? Question mark. How many chickens have you cooked this week? Question mark. These are direct questions. But if it starts something like, I wonder if you could fry my chicken for me. This is not a question, so you don't have a question mark. Think about the beginning of the sentence and also the inversion of the subject and the auxiliary. If it hasn't got that, it's not a question, so don't end it with a question mark. Okay. It's a sentence. Now, last one are of course exclamation marks. Exclamation marks express shock or surprise or exclamation. We often use them when we want to shout, such as help, I need somebody, help, not just anybody, help, you know I need someone, help. Or hey, you ate my chicken. They're always followed, all 3 of these are always followed by capital letters, because they stop a sentence and therefore we need to start a new sentence and therefore we have capital letters. Those are end sentence marks. Commas are not strong enough to end a sentence. Even semicolons are not as strong enough to end a sentence. Only an end sentence mark. You want to talk about something else? Well, all right then. Let's talk about apostrophes. Apostrophes, there are only 2 real uses. Now, we can, some Americans might argue about this, but we'll talk about that in a second. So the apostrophes are omissive or possessive. So an omissive apostrophe is where you omit a letter, where you leave some letters out. So think about, I'm sure, I am sure, I'm sure. You put the apostrophe in because you're missing an A and you're joining the letters. I'm sure you can't, can, not. Therefore, you're missing an N and an O there, but it doesn't matter. It's a contraction. It's a contraction. So you can't, apostrophe T, drink while you're missing out the A. You're eating. Often the G is not pronounced, particularly in certain parts of the United States. They can't pronounce words properly. And therefore they would say eating instead of eating. And if you wanted to reproduce that error, you would say you would put an apostrophe to show that a letter has been missed off. I'm sure you can't drink while you're eating chicken. I'm sure you can't drink while you're eating chicken. These are omissive apostrophes. Oh, what about possessive apostrophes? Well, okay. Here's a sentence with possessive apostrophes. Watch what happens here. Jesus's disciples' understanding was as strong as John's mother's lace curtains. Don't get into the theology of this yet. I'm talking at a point before the resurrection when Jesus' disciples didn't really understand what was going on. So don't get hung up on the theology. But Jesus's, we're looking at this, if a word ends in S, you would put the apostrophe after the S. Jesus's disciples. C.S. Lewis's Chronicles of Narnia. You put the apostrophe after the S. Now, putting 2 S's isn't wrong. If you want to follow that with an S, that's not wrong, but it's not necessary either. Now, this is particularly clear in plurals. So disciples is plural, and you're talking about them as a group, their understanding. Jesus is one man with an ending in S. Disciples, plural, thus ending in S, and thus the possessive apostrophe is on the outside. However, understanding was as strong as John's. John is the subject here, or the main part. Then you've got an apostrophe S to make it possessive on John. It belongs to John. What belongs to John? John's mother. Well, what about John's mother? It was John's mother's lace curtains. So the lace curtains belong to John's mother, therefore John's mother's lace curtains. John only has one mother. Poor lad. John only has one mother, and therefore John's, singular, but with an apostrophe S to make it possessive, mother's with an apostrophe S to make it possessive. Okay. Now, the other thing I mentioned is an Americanism. Now, I want to make something very clear. There are two sorts of English in the world. There's British English and there's wrong. That was a joke. Please don't send the CIA round. Americans use them to make decades, for example, plural, the 1960s with an apostrophe S. You never pluralize with an apostrophe in civilized English, excuse me, British English. And therefore, I apologize to my American cousins, this is mostly tongue-in-cheek. Mostly. To pluralize with an apostrophe is absolutely anathema. Don't do it. And therefore 1960s is without an apostrophe. It's just an S on the end. It's something that upsets me. Okay, I hope today we have cleared up some questions over the use of commas, end sentence marks, and apostrophes. So all that remains for me to say is thanks for watching this Oak Tree English video on punctuation. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and do feel free to show this to all your class. Thank you.